Somebody forgot to wake me up. I'm sorry.
I'd like to call the Board of Supervisors meeting to order. As always, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We do have a quorum. We do need to adopt an agenda. I've got two items I'd like to add to the agenda, and I'd like to call it 1A under special appearances. Call it the Public Safety Telecommunicator Week Proclamation. And then under information and correspondence, number 13, which is about the opioid settlement.
Opioid Abatement Authority grant
There you
would be
go.
proper.
Anybody else have anything we need to add to this?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're going to do public comment a whole bunch of times tonight. Let's do public comment for the first round, general public comment. Is there any general public comment in round one?
Hi, my name is Carrie Gaviria. I'm here to request today, when you talk about the secondary six-year plan for VDOT, that you consider paving the remainder of Floor Road. I've outlined in my letter the reasons that we feel like this is significant for our community, and I hope you take it under consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Other public comment? Other public comments? Anybody watching us? 0 people are watching us, yeah, well, at least we're consistent.
Thank you.
All right, public comments closed on the front side of this. Since we have a lot of special appearances today, we're not gonna go through all the departments. There are reports in our packet and posted on the website in the packet. Anybody have any questions, comments on any of the reports?
Yes, sir.
All right. Moving on to the consent agenda, we have minutes from 3/28/23 and then 4/05/23. What would y'all like to do?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. 1A. We have Noah, so I guess you communicate. We have a Madison, Virginia proclamation, which is the Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. I'll read it real quickly. Whereas the emergency communications team of Madison County and the Commonwealth of Virginia work tirelessly behind the scenes to process information and respond resources in the midst of natural disasters, pandemics, civil unrest, terrorism, and other man-made and natural threats and hazards. And whereas each emergency begins and ends locally, And whereas emergency communications officers are considered the first of the first responders and provide a vital link between on-scene personnel and additional resources. And whereas emergency communications answers the calls for help day and night, holidays and weekends, summons first responders, and provides those responders with the information necessary to respond safely, act as a lifeline to responders in a hazardous atmosphere, and facilitate resources for responders. And whereas the role of emergency communication officers is essential to each emergency as they are the first point of contact in most emergencies. And then it's now, therefore, I, Clay Jackson, Chairman of the Madison County Board of Supervisors, do hereby proclaim April 9th through the 15th, 2023 as Public Safety Telecommunications Week in Madison County, and encourage all citizens to honor the county's emergency communications team and to recognize their service behind the scenes and commitment to health, safety, and welfare of all who live and visit Madison County. What do y'all want to do with this? Or comments?
Does this have a number or just?
I think we're just no number.
Proclamation, so you're fine doing it that way. If it's just a proclamation recognizing whatever the date of the week is for Telecommunication Week would be sufficient.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the proclamation for Public Safety Telecommunicators Week.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And thank you to our telecommunicators and all they do for Madison County.
So, Mr. Chairman, I do have one thing for, actually, for the public in general, and especially for Noah. So, my neighbor this past week had a massive heart attack, and y'all's response was incredible. I hear it up here every week of how, I look at the reports and see the response times and all that stuff. Well, I live in Etlin, and you guys were there in about 13 minutes. And so my neighbor's girlfriend said to relate to you guys how much she appreciated that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Any other comments on this one? All right. Mr. Carter Reese is here, and he's going to tell us about his Blue Ridge Governor School student report. Mr. Reese, welcome.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, before, I'd like to give him a little more quick introduction. I happen to be former classmate of his parents, both outstanding folks. His mother, Patty, is the vice principal of Waverly Yao, and his father, Lee Reese, longtime local enforcement, and done a lot of drone projects. But Carter is student body president, and there's many other things that he's involved in the community. Last year, you may recall, we had Natalie Coates as the Blue Ridge Governor School student that did their presentation. We're happy that the Blue Ridge Governor School via Madison County High School has reached out to allow their students to interact with county government. So Carter, we hope, is a continuation of many years to come for the presentation of Blue Ridge Governor School. So, Mr. Reese?
Thank you very much. Figure out how this, there we go. So again, my name is Carter Reese. Thank you all for having me. And the title of my presentation was Parks and Preservation. And we'll kind of see how those two tie together here in a little bit. Try and see if I can. There we go. All right. So again, I am the senior class president. I'm also a member of SCA, Principals Cabinet, Beta Club, and just a lot of other things at school. I like to be involved. And what kind of drove me to kind of do this project was, I forget that I can look up here and not over there. Kind of a different layout. Was that recently the world population hit 8 billion. Obviously, those people all need places to go. Businesses, residences. Just with the population growing, we need more things for those people to do, more places for those people to go. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So my overall topic was expansion, mainly of just people in urban areas, in rural areas, just kind of expansion in general. But more specifically, I tried to answer this question. You can go ahead to the next slide to see the question. So how can expansion of an area have an effect on the habitats and nature surrounding it, and in what ways can we deal with those effects? And so the main two things that I discovered that we can deal with the effects of expansion on the environment are rules and codes and regulations and the installation of parks. And the people that help me with those discoveries, I will introduce you to, or maybe not introduce you to, here on the next slide. I'm sure you know the two people on the left, that is Mr. Joe Sexton and Mr. Jamie Wilkes. They are right down the road at the Building and Zoning Office. I did my Governor School internship with them, and I learned a lot about how inspections and how the rules and regulations of the state of Virginia can help kind of mitigate the effects that expansion and construction have on the environment. And on the right, I'm sure, again, so you know who that is. That's Ms. Lindsay Von Herbulis. I did my community service. I was mainly in communication with Ms. Von Herbulis over the course of my community service. I was also in contact with Mr. Jerry Carpenter. And here in a little bit, I'll kind of get into what I did for that. But first, let's kind of start with my internship and what I did during that time period. I mainly did it first semester, fall semester. But let's take a look at the things that I discovered. So right here are two really good examples of people following the rules and regulations and just making sure the environment is well protected during the course of construction. So at the bottom of the hill on the left, that was, I forget where that was located, but as you can see, the building site is very well kept. At the bottom of the hill, I know you can't see it all that well, but there is a line of silt fence, which I learned was very integral to preservation of ecosystems surrounding construction sites, because what it does is it decreases the amount of runoff from these construction sites, which is a main cause of pollution coming off of construction sites. On the right, that is behind Plow and Hearth on Route 29. Those are some solar panels they just had put in. And again, you can't see it all that well. I tried to get the best pictures I could, but there is straw down. And I learned that straw kind of simulates the idea of grass, which also filters runoff and groundwater, groundwater. I had trouble with the word there, into nearby creeks and streams, which again, main cause of pollution until that grass seed underneath the straw is able to grow. So below, we will look at a bad example of a build site that has not been following these rules and regulations. I was on a ride-along. Most of my internship consisted of ride-alongs with Mr. Wilkes and Mr. Sexton. And this one was certainly a site that we went to. I went to the site with Mr. Wilkes, who noted that it was atrocious and looked like a junkyard. There was machinery strewn everywhere. There are mounds of dirt, which, as I've said before, runoff from that. As soon as it rains, it's going to hit that dirt and it's going to get into nearby creeks. There is kind of a line of silt fence technically, but it's not upright and won't really do anything in the event of rain or any kind of weather event. And the whole site was really just a mess all the way around. It was not very well kept up. And so that was really just not a great example of how build sites are maintained. And the unfortunate thing was the homeowner declined to fix any of this. Usually when you fail an inspection, you would want to fix it because you want to finish the project you're working on. But this person was very set in his ways, we will say, and did not want to change anything despite being failed by the inspectors, which is unfortunate. And that's something that building inspectors and people trying to conserve the environment can run into. But it's also up to judgment. Usually you want to finish the project, but this person did not for some reason. So it's unfortunate. So if we go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about my community service. So in November, I hosted a tree planting event at Hoover Ridge where we planted some oak trees to commemorate the accomplishments of several people in the Madison County community. I think they were Joyce Gentry, Bruce Parker, Valerie Miller, J.T. Price, and it's going to be bad if I forget the last one. Eddie Dean, yeah. To commemorate their contributions to both Hoover Ridge Park and the greater Madison County community. So we planted 5 oak trees in their honor, as well as 4 dogwoods for several notable businesses. So that took place on the 20th. And then on the left, you can see some other just mulching and bagging leaves that I did also as part of my community service. And so we've already talked about the rules and regulations, but the other part of that was parks. And so that's what I'm going to talk about here in a second, if we can go to the next slide. So parks are also really big in kind of preserving the ecosystems and environment around just metropolitan areas in general. So through my research, I learned that in an area of China called Shenzhen, as we know, China is a massive metropolitan area, over 1 billion people live there. And something that they found out in Shenzhen was that if a park was within 10 minutes of walking distance, people were more likely to go to that park. People want to kind of get away from their jobs. And so parks are a great way for people to do that. I think even down on 29 at North Point, that new residential area that's going in, kind of in between the gas station in Centaura and I think at the Greene County line, there are 3 parks going in that area where there's I think supposed to be about 900 different residences, from single homes to apartments. It's going to be a lot of people, but there's going to be 3 parks there for people to go and kind of get away from the packed-in nature of that area. And so parks are just a great way for nature to flourish, great way for things to grow while being unimpeded by growth and expansion. So if we go to the next slide. So my future plans, I plan to attend the Virginia Military Institute in the fall and study civil engineering. And then from there, I am thinking on going into the Coast Guard and doing some things with environmental engineering in that branch of the military. And so that's my main plan for the future. And I'm excited to move on to the next phase of my life. So we can go to the next slide. So right here was the slide where I gave some advice to future governor school students. Everything that it boiled down to was don't procrastinate and do practice. So procrastination, obviously, don't want to put things off to the last minute. I made sure to accentuate the fact that you don't need to start things 10 weeks before the date they're due. But obviously, you don't want to wait until the last minute. So I made sure to hammer that point home, because I will be the first person to admit there were some points during this project where I probably should have gotten things done, but I didn't, and I was stressed at later points. But don't procrastinate was what I told future students. And also practice your presentation. Notice that a lot of people, or a couple people really, weren't practicing what they were going to say. And even if you just practice it, say it to yourself in the shower, say it to yourself in the mirror, talk to a wall. There are a bunch of ways you can practice and just trying to get your thoughts out into words. And so that was my advice to future governor school students. And then on the last slide, which I think is the last slide, yes, I asked for questions. And so I will pose the same question to anybody here. Do we have any questions about my project?
Questions or comments?
Questions,
Well,
comments,
I have
concerns?
one. Your fourth
Yes, sir.
slide, how can expansion of an area have an effect on the habitats and nature surrounding it, and in what ways can we deal with those effects? I suggest that you present that to the Comprehensive Plan Committee to ponder. There is a Comprehensive Plan Committee meeting now to to talk about the next 5, 10 years of Madison's, you know, their whole comprehensive plan. What do we want to see? And I think he ought to give that to Ligon Webb, who's in the same office with
Yes, sir.
Jamie and
I
them.
met him.
Pop back down there and give that question to him.
Okay, will do.
And we're meeting on Thursday at, what, 6? 5:30. There you go.
Okay.
Be glad to have you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
That's right.
I will try. I might have something that day, but I will obviously let you know. So, any other?
When you were riding with Mr. Wilkes and Joe Sexton, and they had to go out and they saw, when you saw projects that were going well and then projects that were going poorly, how'd it go? How was their demeanor?
Their demeanor was very professional. It was when they saw good build sites, they let the homeowner know, let the constructor know that everything was going fine, everything was up to par. And if they weren't, they also let them know in a very polite and professional manner, hey, you need to fix this. This can't happen. This isn't up to what we need. And so it was very professional and very good.
Who else has comments? Thank you very much, Mr.
Awesome.
Reese.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to the 6-year plan draft presentation. Mr. San Nicholas, come on up and talk to us from VDOT. Probably not. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Ed Nicholas, the Assistant Emergency Administrator for Charlottesville Office, VDOT. And my purpose this afternoon is to present the county's draft FY 2024-29 secondary 6-year plan for the board's comment and prior to the approval next month. Next slide, please.
I've got a quick question before you go any further. So why does the first slide say it's rural rustic road program as opposed to the draft secondary 6-year?
Most of what we're going to be covering here as far as projects is related to rural rustic road.
Okay. All right. Very well. Thank you.
As an overview, the purpose of the rural rustic road program is to pave existing unpaved road that qualify, including reestablishment of ditches as well as shoulders. The goal is to leave trees, vegetation, side slopes, and open drainage undisturbed to the maximum extent possible. To be eligible, the unpaved road must be already in the state secondary road system, must carry no more than 1,500 vehicles per day, must have a minimum of 50 vehicles per day to be eligible, must be a priority as far as the approved secondary 6-year plan approved by the board, is used for local traffic who are familiar with the features of the road, could have a minimal anticipated traffic growth, and what we look for is a minimum of 16 feet. We prefer 18, but we will go with a minimum of 16 feet. Next slide, please. So this slide is really the cover sheet, the summary of the funding allocation for the next 6 years, broken down by telefee and district grant unpaved allocations across each fiscal year. I believe the board should have received a complete copy of the 6-year plan that includes all the projects and the countywide UPCs as well. As noted, the final allocation funding by the Commonwealth Transportation Board is expected this month. I don't anticipate much changes in terms of allocation, but there may be some slight changes with the amounts, but I don't anticipate much. Next slide. So there are currently 6 previously approved rural rustic road projects. Desert Road Phase 1, Phase 2, Emmett Road, Whippoorwill Road, Walker's Mill Lane, and a portion of Turner Drive. To date, Desert Road Phase 1 is fully funded, with the remaining projects fully funded in either this coming fiscal year, FY 2024, or in the later years of the secondary 6-year plan. Both Desert Road Phases 1 and 2 are scheduled to be paved this summer. Currently, there are unallocated balances of $227,420 and $368,335 for FY 2028 as well as FY 2029, respectively. During the upcoming year, we will work with county staff to identify other qualifying projects for these last 2 years of the plan. Next slide, please. So, left with 3 options. There is approximately 0.26 miles of Turner Drive that currently does not qualify due to the narrowness of the road, which is about 14 feet or less, created by adjoining trees, existing fence, and minor banks. I know that county staff has been working with the affected property owners to determine their interest in paving and willingness to donate needed right-of-way for that portion of Turner Drive. As a result, the project exceeds the parameters of a typical rural rustic road project and will be considered a standalone project on the secondary six-year plan. Pause for a moment. So when I say standalone project, it's not going to be characterized as a rural rustic road because it doesn't meet those parameters on the previous slide. Second, we recommend that leaving the balances of unallocated funds until next fiscal year. This will provide ample time for VDOT as well as the county staff to identify additional roads for FY 2028 as well as 2029. I think last year there was a suggestion to perhaps get with our area headquarters, in this case Madison area headquarters, to find out where our troubled routes were in terms of maintenance. We did get that list, and I think you have a hard copy of the 6 routes on there in priority order based on our superintendent. And those are the things that we're going to look at in terms of considering for 2028 and 2029. So essentially what we're looking at is we have a balance entry, unallocated funds for 2028 and 2029. There is ample time to identify these routes at this point. There's far enough out in the outreach to do that. We do have, as I stated before, we have 6 routes that are currently on plan, and are in the process of being executed in the out years as indicated in the previous slide. Next slide. So that's a page of the secondary six-year plan. Now, P Ridge Road is essentially complete, just waiting for what we call a C5 report to close out that project. And all the other roads that I believe mentioned. Unless there's any questions. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions the board may have.
Where's Route 4005? It's your last page. Yeah, there you go, that one. Where are those last 2? You're going to do some fertilization and seeding,
So,
and that's part of the 6-year plan, huh?
so essentially what happens is you have 2 pots of money. You have the district unpaved funding. Well, that's the money that we use for the rural rustic roads. Then you have what they call telephone money. Those are funding, and if you look at the first sheet that I had there, it shows you across all the fiscal years, and virtually the same amount of money. And that's the amount of money that's spread across all 6 years under what we call county-wide projects. So it's not, I guess what I'm saying, it's not project specific.
The funding allocation.
The funding allocation and any of the, what we call EPCs in there, they're not tied to any project specifically.
Understood. And then we've got $227,420 in 2028, and then $368,000 in 2029, some change. Right?
Yes.
All right. All right.
Why wouldn't we identify roads we want to put against those monies
I think
between
that's-
now and, I mean, this is a draft, so
Yeah.
between now and then?
I mean, we've got submitted to us currently, we have the list, I assume this is the list by VDOT, that identifies Wright's Lane, Rochelle School Lane, Long Shot Lane, Woodward Hollow, which also has been vetted by the citizens that live on Woodward Hollow in our packet that has all the signatures from all the neighbors that consent to adding it to the six-year plan, which seemingly would be, at least in my view, the one that's most developed at this point, as far as the people that live on it all want it. Then we've got Russ Jones Lane, and then the rest of Emmett Road that's not already covered, in, what's that? FY 2025 it'll be funded. Am I looking at that one right?
I'm sorry, are we speaking about Emmett?
Yeah, Emmett. The first section that is on the six-year plan currently, will be fully funded in 2025, the 0.24 miles.
That is correct.
It would seem to me that probably should think about throwing the rest of Emmett on there, just so we can finish the Emmett Road. But-
Can I ask for clarification?
Sure.
Are we talking about 2028, 2029? And the reason why I bring that up is because, as you see on the slide, we have Whippoorwill Road fully funded in 2026. So
Yeah.
if you change that, I just want you to understand that that means the funding that was supposed to go to Whippoorwill
Oh, yeah, got it.
could impact that.
Absolutely. And then the Turner Drive component, just the portion that is applicable that has the 18 is on the six-year plan. And then we just heard Ms. Lillard talk about how she would like to put Flora Road on there. So by, I don't know, 2035 or 2040 or something, we won't even need roads then. It'll be paved. I mean, how would y'all like to proceed on this? Anybody have recommendations of roads? I know, Jim, haven't you been riding around a whole bunch looking at roads? You have any comments on this?
Not at this time. My biggest concern is that Route 230 gets fixed this year. What's going on with Route 230?
So my understanding is Route 230 is scheduled for paving this year. Not all of 230, but segments of 230. There is, I don't have the date of that, because what typically happens is when the contract is awarded, the contractor sets the schedule within the set parameters. Like for instance, it's going to be this summer, but I can't tell you when, which month that's going to happen.
All
What
right.
usually happens is we get what we call a 2-week look ahead, and that's when we kind of know when it's going to happen.
But the last time we talked, I think at our last meeting, which would have been like 2 or 3 weeks ago now, we were told that 230 was going to be covered in 2025. Wasn't that the story previously? And Jonathan's looking it up right now. What's the word down there, Jonathan?
I'm looking at the 2022, 2023 paving schedule. 230 East Wolftown Hood Road is on that schedule,
For this year.
according to their schedule, yes.
So the end that I believe you're referring to from Exxon to Orange,
Route 15.
yeah, that one, when's that one on the schedule?
I don't see that on the schedule. I know patching started to occur last summer. I believe maintenance funds, they ran out. What I'm seeing, if you want, Mr. Chairman, I'll give you the whole list. 2023 paving schedule
Yeah.
is Route 29 South, 230 East Wolftown Hood Road, 603 Duet Road, 607 Ridgeview Road, 608 Oakland Road, 612 James City Road, 632 Beamtown Road, and there's some activity going on there right now. 640 Trimy Road, 651 Ayler Road, 672 Double Top Road, 678 Tibbs Shop Road, and 683 John Reaver Drive round out the 2023 paving schedule.
If I could.
Sure.
So just to clarify, our district handles primary routes. Anything less than 600 in terms of route numbers is handled by our district. We typically, as a residency, handle what we call secondary routes. I can tell you, based on the information I pulled, and even talking to the pavement manager at the district, so on 230, it looks like from Greene County line to about Riverview Lane. That's one segment. And then the other segment is Shelby Road to Thrift Road. But as I said, there's two sections. It's not the entire 230. So that's what's on 2023.
Mr. St. Nicholas, I believe, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Jewett, but I believe where he's hinting at is 230 Orange Road, which goes from 29 to Route 15. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct. I started patching it last year, but they stopped, and the roads are in bad condition.
I don't have an answer for you, but I will make sure I get an answer for you.
And that, in fairness, there's a list I've compiled. I've reached out to the schools, and they've sent it on to their transportation supervisor. I've reached out to Sheriff Weaver. Those are the two agencies that probably travel the roads most in this county, and we're compiling a list that we will give to Mr. St. Nicholas. I believe they need that by April 28th. It's my understanding it's a long time because headquarters will review that, but ultimately it has to get vetted through Richmond, I believe, before it's decided on the paving schedule. So it is a process, but we'll have that list to Mr. St. Nicholas soon.
But that list
It's not 2023.
is not 2023 and is also not specific to the 6-year road improvement plan. You're more referring to maintenance of roads, and that's not even getting into the other confusing side of smart scale pertaining to the J-turn at Shelby or the potential smart scale at Pratt's with the roundabout.
So just for clarification, you are correct. There are two different programs.
Yeah.
So what Mr. Weekly is referring to is what we call our annual pavement schedule. And that, yes, that is maintenance. And we had talked, and he was going to give me a list of routes by April 28th for FY 2025.
Yeah.
So 2023 is happening this summer. Our 2024 is pretty much locked for next year. And now we are building 2025. So that's the routes we're going to look at. But just to be clear, there is a process, of course, we have to go through because we have been given what we call lane miles targets to hit under different categories, under different ADTs that we have to look at. So it's a process that we have to go through. But I just want to make sure that it's not simply give me a route and we'll put it on the list. We have to vet it through a process.
Oh, no, I threw the smart scale just to confuse the situation even more. All right, let's go back to the original intent of this. Do we want to add or start the process of a potential addition to the 6-year road improvement plan for the unallocated funds in 2028 and 2029? Or we know we are going to have a public hearing on this. When's the public hearing, Mr. Weekly?
So, Mr. Chairman, I will request you all take action today to set that for May 9th at 4 p.m. That would require action.
And do we
And
have,
that, for be clear, would be for the secondary 6-year plan.
and do we have until the 9th or probably the second meeting in April to contemplate adding roads to the 6-year road improvement plan for advertisement for the 9th?
I want to be respectful. I'm going to defer, before I defer to Mr. San Nicolas, I want to point you to a note that he has included on the 6 additional roads that their headquarters here in Madison Superintendent provided, is that the recommendation is to, while there may be unallocated funds, give them time to survey those roads. So even the 3 roads that I provided, that's in the next item on the agenda is alternate road paving request, as well as the 6 roads he provided you today. A lot of those, I think it's fair to say, Mr. San Nicolas, have not been fully reviewed, surveyed, any engineering, any of that to kind of come up with a plan. And I believe that's why Mr. St. Nicholas is suggesting leave the funds unallocated, let them develop us more as recommendations for next year. But Ed, I defer.
That is correct. But just to kind of set the scene in terms of process. Typically, when we get these routes in, we usually, during the winter months, we go through and we review it for meeting 82 requirements, and then we actually do a field survey. And by that time, hopefully when we get to this point where we are now, we have those routes put in there. But fortunately, these routes were just provided to us, so we didn't really have an opportunity to do this. That's why I'm suggesting that perhaps the county staff and VDOT work together, because we have two sets, right? We have a set provided by our area headquarters from the maintenance standpoint. Then we have another set that the public is asking us to look at, and we will do both. It's just trying to get from here to May 9th might be problematic, is all I'm saying.
All right. We have this, all right, I'm gonna try and make this simple because it doesn't seem like we're making any progress at all. We do have this list of these 6 roads. We've got Wrights Lane, Rochelle School Lane, Longshot, Woodward Hollow, Russ Jones, and then the second piece of the Emmett Road. And now we have to add to that list, it sounds like Clore Road and Two-Sing Lane. Do you all want, and I'm going off of the special note that's provided, do you all want to get VDOT to do maybe some field survey and some development of these 8 roads that we are talking about so that potentially in the future we can allocate those unallocated funds?
Yes.
Yes, so VDOT goes out and evaluates the condition of the road, number one, and also takes into consideration the number of residents, the number of, the usage that road's getting, what other criteria are there? I mean, if you all come back and VDOT says, we recommend this, but then this board and county residents say, no, we want this road, then we get what we want, or you get what you want.
No, I wouldn't put it that way. But what I would say is that we are looking at, not from necessarily the number of people there, but we're looking at it from the standpoint of ADT. As I pointed out, we're looking, you got to meet 50, but it can't be more than 1,500 vehicles per day. So we're looking at it from that standpoint. But we're also looking at it from the field assessment to make sure that we have enough width so that we can not only accommodate traffic, but also
But
drainage issues.
it is the Madison County 6-year road improvement plan. So as long as the criteria to the 18 feet, or 16 feet, excuse me, optimally 18, and the 50 ADT to make them qualified for the 6-year road improvement plan, we can put them or realign the order of the 6-year plan.
Yes, you do.
There you
can't
go.
you
Okay.
can't do that.
Yeah.
But VDOT is the one that does the evaluation of this to give us the data, as opposed to county employees riding around and checking this out. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Jonathan still rides around and looks at roads. I know this. He's been doing this for years. But so we've got let's go down the path of these 8 roads and get VDOT to look into it. And then it would sound like you're going to have additional roads potentially from the sheriff's department and the school transportation department.
So, no, let me be clear on that. That's what we're working on for the paving schedule that they're developing for FY '25, are those roads from transportation. What you have before you is just an unpaved road, is what the secondary 6-year road plan is designed for.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go down these 8?
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some way for this board to prioritize these things, right? So I'm just trying to get at what is that data? How do I look at something and even start coming up with a prioritization? And that's what they're going to give us, is it?
to some
Am I
extent.
right?
But to some extent, but they make sure that it
Qualifies.
qualifies. But then, like all these roads on here, the citizens basically come and ask us to go down this path. It seems like Woodward Hollow has done a substantial amount of development by getting all of the residents, or a substantial number of residents, to sign off on the petition. And that's where it kind of comes up to our discretion once they qualify.
I think as far as prioritization of these 8 routes, that's the county's prerogative to do that. All we're here to do is support that effort.
There you go.
Really, at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to.
And if I may, I just recall from our earlier conversation, it may be worthy to interject this in the conversation. We are still working diligently with the residents of Turner Drive. If you may recall, I've said this on several occasions, the right-of-way acquisition, in order to potentially move this project forward, it's an all-or-nothing approach. Leaving the door open, if you will, with the unallocated funds could be a way to, if you wanted to look at creating a phase 2 of Turner Drive, which is the widening ditch lines, all that.
We hear there's one resident.
There's one,
Not looking good.
yeah, there's one resident, at some point in time in the near future, we're hoping to get a determination, either a proceed or no thank you. So we can communicate that back to VDOT. That way they can look at their funding and continue down this list or any direction that you provide.
And that's the reason why we have this outstanding part of Turner Drive that hasn't been resolved yet. The front part of that, which qualifies, is being proposed to remain on the 6-year plan for this go-around. By leaving those unallocated funds in 2028 and 2029 gives us the flexibility to work down the list as you prioritize and figure out, okay, what, at the end of the day, we've got this amount of money in 2028, 2029, what can we find and fit into that based on your priorities?
All right. Are we good on the 8 roads? Let's pass these along to Mr. San Nicolas, see what's qualifying and what's not, and maybe he can get us some analytics or some data on these roads, and then we can start identifying and adding to the 6-year road improvement plan.
So yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So the objective for us coming back on the 9th, and again, you'll have to vote officially here in a moment when you choose to set that public hearing. But as the approach is, the public hearing will be based upon the roads that Ms. Turner has above, which is your existing. And then the last comment you made is what we're working to develop. So those roads may not, you're not expecting any of those roads to show up on this year's draft 6-year plan.
Let's go down that path. Does anybody want to change the order or add a road currently for the potential of an advertised public hearing on May 9th? Everybody good?
I'm good.
All right. Now, since Mr. Weekly's brought it up, what do you all want to do about having a public hearing on May 9th for the 6-year road improvement plan? Need a motion.
Is that gonna give us enough time, you think?
Yes, and
Okay.
we've already
So-
vetted that through VDOT, that's
Very
a
well.
safe schedule, and they have an opening to be present for the public hearing on May 9th at 4 PM. So you just authorize me to advertise for the public hearing via that date and time.
So
if
I
you-
don't remember, is there a drop dead date when we have to approve it? Would that be June
Typically in
30th?
June.
Huh?
Typically in June.
Yeah,
May,
okay.
June.
2028. What would y'all like to do?
Very well, Mr. Chairman, I move that we hold a public hearing on the secondary, 6-year secondary road plan on May 9th.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We need to make sure we invite the people from Forest Drive. If they feel adamantly about the 6-year road improvement plan. Yeah, they still want to be invited. Oh, yeah. It's not going so well.
Say it's falling apart.
Yeah. I'll tell Letty. All right. Now, we have another VDOT issue, I guess, or comment. Let's go to 3A, we've already talked about the additional paving potentially, it sounds like for 2025, so we're getting ahead of the game on that. What about the speed study request on the specific road, requested by Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with the speed request, and I called the individual, you got the letter there, thank you, Kim. I called the individual just to clarify, because a lot of times we get a speed reduction request. This is actually requesting the speed study to increase the speed to 45. And that request came from Mr. Weaver for a speed study on 231 North near the Hebron Church Road intersection to include up to the bridge and the S curves. Certainly, the board provides direction to myself, which ultimately would go to VDOT if you choose to do those things. A citizen, even myself as a citizen, I just can't make that request to VDOT and they honor that. It goes to the governing body. So anytime these requests come to my office, I make the board aware. You can make a decision to give me direction. And that's why it's included in your packet tonight.
All right. I drive this road at 45 often. It is very dangerous. I do not think we should increase the speed limit on a road that has several blind corners, especially when corn's standing super tall next to the road. Would y'all like to have VDOT do like a speed study on the road, or what would y'all like to do here? Do you want to even consider it at all, or think we got some options? How would y'all like to proceed?
I have no appetite for it.
All right, great. So
That's,
everybody good with leaving it at 35?
I will administratively notify Mr. Weaver of the board's decision.
All right.
The other information in that packet, Mr. Chairman, a lot of it you've already covered. I do believe Ms. Guevara just left, but I think she's going to follow the similar path as Mr. Weaver, and the residents of Wilbur Hollow, and I believe Tussin Lane will have some additional letters. So even though those roads may not make this plan, I think there's value in that, the board just indicated. So certainly, if we have a multitude of residents, we'll make sure the board's aware of that. That way you know the support is there, and pass that along to the VDOT as well. So that's all I have on that topic, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right. Anything else, Mr. San Nicholas?
No, sir.
Does anybody mind if I think we've got VDOT here. Do you all mind if I go to the public and see if anybody has any comments on? Anybody have any comments about VDOT issues or anything that we can convey? Identify yourself. Identify yourself.
I'm Joe May.
Joe May. All right. And your question is?
Are you gonna start at my end of the road?
He does not know where that is. Give a crossroad or something, Joe May.
We have, well, first of all, well, it's not fully funded until 2026, and we haven't gone to that level of detail just yet. But, we'll work with you and see what, which end to start with, we got to take a look at what makes sense. But I'm happy to sit with you and we can talk through that.
Thank you.
All right. And Jim?
Yeah, Jim Smith, Brightwood, at the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in front of our house, so it's considered more than somebody is not
You want it removed or? Oh, it's already been removed.
Put back.
Oh. All right, so what road was that one more time? Ridgeview, missing a 25-mile-per-hour sign. There you go. There's a good suggestion. All right, Mr. Sharman? All right, there's a good one. Mr. Sharman?
605 Parish Road, part of 605 in the Midland area. I'm appreciative that you mentioned, Chairman, that on a paved road at 35 miles per hour, this blind road is very dangerous. Well, we have blind hills, and we have two choke points where it's for unpaved is 35 miles per hour. That's March 25, and common speed is probably around 40 to 50. And at that beginning point, right at Noble at the cemetery, that uphill, it's one. And many times, I probably do 25, probably 20 to 25 miles per hour normally. And many times I've had to swerve off into the, we don't even really have to go, but to let somebody else who just come right over go, or I've just reached the hill, and then somebody else trying to come up it is having to scoot over to avoid me just popping over that hill. Then as you approach the intersection of Parish Road and Mitchell Mountain Road, there's another blind hill and blind curve, which is also just a one lane. Now, it runs on 605 at Parish, it's 2 lanes. And you just kind of pull over, it's not a problem, you see this person approaching, but it's much wider. But these 2 hill spots are 1 lane. And at that part where it's approaching Mitchell Mountain Road, the big danger is people coming down that hill, the curve and the downhill, and it's 1 lane, and they can't see the people coming up. So they're coming downhill at a speed, and you just screech on your brakes and hope that you have a 4-wheel drive, you can actually stop. I can count that many times, I've nearly had an accident, or somebody else had because of me coming up and doing that. So let me also make a pitch here. If you want us to do the right-of-ways, we can get them. If you want us to pay for the widening, we can do it. We just like a tax credit for the amount that we just moved to us. We can do it probably this year because everybody there knows this. We're all relatively, we have 40 acres. Most everybody else on that road has more. So, and we definitely have more than 50 cars per day go there because it's also a through route. But those are just flash dangerous areas.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, sir. Looking.
Can't solve that, but I want to add value to that
Good.
conversation. Thank you, Mr. Sharman. We did, Ms. Gear came prior as a resident of that road as well. VDOT has looked at it to see if it would qualify for your rural rustic. And as very eloquently and factually stated, there are choke points there that wouldn't qualify. So that's just my feedback of what they've already examined. How do you correct that? I defer to Ed as the expert, but they did look to see if that would qualify as rural rustic, but the width is what took it out.
All right.
We can get the right-of-way just signed over, and we pay for it, and we have a tax credit to do that, and do it according to VDOT standards.
I'm not sure about a tax credit, I'm not sure.
No, I don't know either. Is it something you take a think about? And I assume you're going to come back and see us here in a couple of weeks. Probably May 9th, it looks like. Would you be able to maybe have a little bit of information or get Mr. Sharman's card and y'all could have some dialogue or something? It's a start.
But see, that's one of the concerns. That's why we really look for
Yeah.
18 preferred, 18 feet, or 16 minimum. For that very reason, typically, what we've seen, not in all cases, when you hard surface a road, people tend to speed up. And so if you don't have that width, and you don't have the line of sight.
Tammy Gear, I know she was asking for paving up to the, right beyond the cemetery.
the whole
But-
road.
Well, pave the whole road, I'd love that too, but I'm just saying just make it wide enough so we don't crash.
All right.
Leave it unpaved, that's okay, my wife won't appreciate me saying that, but.
Yeah. All right. So maybe we've got a solution here of not crashing. Let's exchange some information and maybe we can get something going on. And if they've got some right of ways and have the palette for it, then maybe something can get done. Anybody else have any VDOT issues they want to address? And nobody's watching us, so it's just y'all. All right. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, boy. FY24 budget, public hearing. Mr. Weekly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Turner will bring up on the screen before you and the public is the proposed FY24 budget. And I would like to thank my colleague, Ms. Warren, who's worked hard as well as other team members to develop this. Next slide, please. So what is included in this presentation, we started early on. There was multiple budget workshops or meetings with the Board of Supervisors. First thing you worked on was develop and provide and approve your goals and priorities to be included as part of your FY24 budget submittal and approval process. There's some overview and highlights we will hit on with expenditures and different funding areas. Outside agency funding is included. I know that'll probably be some good discussion had as well. Revenue and expenditure summary, and then kind of where we're at or where do we need to go to ramp up the budget process, which is required by state code. Next slide, please. I'm going to thank you. Thank you. You know my eyes. You're already learning so well. So some of these were carryovers. We didn't want to lose sight of that. I think there might have been one or two additional. But your FY24 goals and priorities, approve access to broadband services. The board took the step forth by applying for the VATI grants. There's been several you've applied for. Only one so far has been awarded, and there is one still pending that was supposed to be announced December of 2022. So we're still hopeful and waiting for that announcement. Where we're at currently is the areas outside of the Etlin area is still being determined. That's part of the existing VATI grant. Everything else, if you think of, your Haywood, coming back, Brightwood, Locustdale, a lot of the center areas of the county will be covered. The board was just updated at the last meeting where a memorandum of understanding was executed between Brightspeed, which will be the internet service provider for that Wolftown Hood area. They have to complete that. Their timeline is actually shorter. It's by December 2024. The rest of the RISE project that's on that timeline above is tied to Firefly and their completion date, which all of these are vetted and approved and agreed to with Department of Housing and Community Development, which is a state agency. The RISE project has a completion date of August 2025. Complete major capital projects. The public safety radio system and financial software replacement are ongoing. I'm happy to report that you are making significant steps to kind of make that final determination of one remaining tower site so we can stay in our timeline and hopefully within budget to complete that project. Right now, the trajectory that you're on, we feel confident most likely summer of 2024, hopefully we can have that completed. That's why the August date is there. Financial software replacement, Ms. Warren, not because she's sitting beside me, but it was give with recognition. She has really led the way on that with some of her team members. Tyler was a three-phased project. Phase one with accounts payable, that went live in January, is working well. Actually, Ms. Warren has been uploading the new budget in Tyler Munis. We're moving away from RDA, was the original software. So we anticipate that completion, which phase two will be AP payroll. They have started. Ms. Warren is the PM for that. Phase three is building and permit enforcement. I will PM that along with some zoning and building personnel. We believe we'll have that wrapped up by January 2024. And there was some additional funding, which I think shows up in your capital part of your budget for that ERP project. Completed facilities inventory and needs assessment. I thank the board again. You all approved a facility condition assessment. We actually utilized that between the schools and the county to develop our 2024 capital improvement items for this year, and it will be utilized to push well beyond the 5-year plan, which is what you normally approve. We have outlooks through 20 years. Naturally, you have to get updates on quotes and vet those 20-year outlooks, but we feel like it was a step in the right direction to, I'm a big list guy, put it on the list that exists so we can identify and bring it to you as recommendation. You all can prioritize it. So that was a big help. 3A is a new plan for a new EMS facility, or I should say it's new as far as a renovation. I think last year you were looking at some different properties in your capital plan. Obviously, the change of the guard, if you will, of that medical services landed us at the former squad building. So that renovation discussion is ongoing right now. I'll have an update later on, information and correspondence. Disposing of surplus real estate, we set a date of December the 23rd. Right now, the board has not positioned or directed me any further real estate. You all were able to sell the former Thrift Road complex to the Community Services Board, which will expand much-needed services that you all have sought for many years. They now own the Thrift Road property. So any disposal of surplus property will be at your direction. Establish and maintain an ongoing CIP. Again, that is being done through the facilities condition assessment. And there's some software that goes with that, so we can update that regular as you decide on renovations or projects or maintenance items. We update critical asset equipment like HVAC or so forth. We put in new dates which generate a new life cycle. So that could stay there forever unless you assume it and we take it off later, but the board did recommend leaving that there. Number 5, negotiate an optimal exit of Greene County from RSA and review and discuss future RSA plan and policies. I think many of the general public and the press has been following this for a long time. Greene County is very close to an official withdrawal. I think they're getting close for the SCC approval, but there is a memorandum of agreement that's been in place for well over a year that keeps RSA together. It just goes from a 3-member county to a 2-member county, which will be remaining counties of Orange and Madison. But I believe the board's direction is we will have conversations with Orange just to, look at that long-term structure and operations, if you will. So that was another. So you're getting ready to complete the exit, but continue to work on the future of RSA and what that means for Madison. Number 6, increase human resource support and employee assistance. We look at that of various ways, whether there's additional benefits or training resources needed. We've successfully cultivate some additional certification processes and enhancement with various positions, HR being one of them. And we're happy about that. We believe investing in people is a good thing. It brings more service to the customers, which are our citizens. Develop incentive program and public safety pay scale. That we started and was put on hold basically when the state got into the COLA. We were living at a 7% one time. They're now positioned at 5%. The General Assembly goes into session tomorrow, and we'll see where they stay. But we have started that. We fully developed with the Sheriff's Office. Ms. Warren and I met with them, and we've got some additional information from EMS and Emergency Communications. The idea there is other jurisdictions do that, and it's a way that someone who's hired in those positions, which are really beyond, when I say beyond critical, it's the availability of key personnel at this time and day in the employment world. But it allows someone, when they're hired, they know the steps where they would go through and what that looks like. And it also gives them proper separation. I think what we learned early on, Sheriff's Department, for example, there was a lot of grouping of multiple positions at a grade 15, which should have been some probably at a grade 17. So we will continue to develop that and bring that to the board if you want to give that a future consideration in FY25. But that's something that staff will work on and ultimately have to come to the board for any consideration or approval. Provide and encourage adequate training certifications. We already talked about that. And most importantly, number 7, the comprehensive plan update. You're required by statute to update that. I think it was last completed in February 2018. It is currently underway. I encourage the general public, if you wish to attend, the next meeting is this Thursday at 5:30 in the board auditorium. Next slide, please. So that was your priority and goals. Overview of the budget. Most spending allocated, and this has been year over year. There's nothing new this year, but it's for education and public safety. And you'll see that breakout in a little bit in a pie chart. FY24 shows the full effect of changes in payroll costs. So early on, again, we were kind of watching the state, watching other localities, seeing what was going on. And there was 2 different budgets between the House bill and the Senate bill. Some thought there would be an additional 2%, some stayed at 5%. The skinny budget that they passed when their last time they were in session has the 5% COLA. And then the board's additional consideration of the 9.9% health insurance increase. The board said they would commit to pick up half. The other half is passed on to the employee. This budget is balanced. It requires no tax increase. It does come with a use of fund balance totaling $205,676 from the general fund and $2,685,294 from the capital fund. That last number for the capital fund is important because you're going to see a much larger number, I think almost 9 million. What they're trying to reflect there is monies coming from your fund balance. The other, we'll talk about existing debt service that you have for those other projects. Next slide, please. So highlights, again, personnel cost increase is driven by health insurance premium. I said 9.9, round that up 10% increase. This budget is built around a 50-50 split between employer and employee and the 5% COLA. General fund contingencies, we are at $314,872 for operational contingencies, and that, again, is for unexpected costs. Everything from 1 penny up, automatically board approval. There is no discretionary there. And really, that's a set aside for the unexpected. It's part of your financial policies that set that threshold. And there's an additional $22,963 of annual leave contingency. I know that seems like a weird number. We've kind of gone back through historicals, and we've had some hefty payouts when long-term employees retire. You have a cost associated with that. Even though we only pay out 240 hours, it still adds up. And then the board had a lot of conversation back and forth about should there be an additional monies beyond what will be the general fund or a transfer from our operation to theirs come July 1 if you approve this budget. In addition to, the board agreed, I believe it's a 1% calculation, $144,192 will be set aside in the county's contingency for unexpected costs related to school. I'm going to speak for myself and my understanding. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it's key to emphasize that contingency funding all together, those 3 line items are at your discretions. There is no guarantee to any agency or department that those funds will be utilized. Those funds are programmed for contingency at your discretion and your discretion only. Next slide, please. So highlight of some capital expenditures. Can you bring that up a little? I'll look down at my computer. All right, so in total for your capital funding, $8,912,535. The grant funding portion represents $2,537,577. Think of your ARPA funds, that's what that monies represents. Carryover from prior capital funding, so any funding remaining from other projects carry forward. That represents $389,664. Fund balance, that's that other slide that you're using, $2,685,294. And then the borrowed portion, so if you recall, you borrowed funds, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, for the purpose of the primary school renovation project and the radio project. So this reflects the full remaining amount of those loan funds, if you will. And right now, I believe that's all sitting towards the radio project because the primary school project was successfully closed out under budget. So as a total, it's $8.9 million. being general fund balance of 2.6 million of that 8.9 million. Any questions on that as I will go through some of the categories real quickly. Stick with that, yes. So in that capital, there's roofing, there's some structural replacement, HVAC. All this was driven and reviewed by the board in the facility condition assessment report. So the total for those CARP, that's CARP is thinking of your capital asset replacement program. I know some community members spoke of that last budget cycle, and that's what we captured here. Total is $131,335. In addition to that, vehicles and equipment, there are there's a generator in here, reflects 151,000 of the 302. And then there are sheriff vehicles that make up that other 151, so that's the 302. Fiber, we have 3 current open POs. It's fiber to 414 and 410, that's the building down the hill from here. Fiber to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office as well as the courthouse, and then fiber that runs from 911 to the Hoover Ridge Tower site. So that's what is represented there. Moving along, the other capital projects, and that just breaks them out what we spoke of. You have your public radio safety program, 3.3 million. Broadband, the reason why that number is higher than the ARPA funds we just spoke of, it is now at $2,973,264. The board passed via vote back before the application was submitted for your last VATI grant. The Ardolph area that was challenged by Chantel, and Chantel, this is the Etland and Nethers area that I'm speaking of for broadband services. Chantel backed out. That left that area unserved. Firefly was willing to partner through your request for proposal. We searched for or solicited proposals for internet service provider. Ultimately, you selected them. And as part of that local match commitment, which is what you're using your ARPA funds for the RISE project, the county committed a not to exceed $400,000. So you add that action with the ARPA money is why you get to the 2.9 million. ERP, we feel like 107,000 of additional monies to completely close that project out. I think that had a January 2024 timeline. County reassessment, that's going to be procured hopefully next year. I haven't mentioned in your information correspondence, but that RFP has been issued to start soliciting proposals. But we anticipate that costing approximately $450,000. We are saying we need $300,000 to start work this year, expecting the other $150K will be programmed into next year's budget. You all have done a great job of setting money aside in years past. So I believe there was only about a $50,000 delta we had to plan for the full $450,000, I say expectation, but the RFPs will let us know what that true dollar amount is. By the way, you will not go past the $300,000 for FY24. EMS station, I've brought back to the board in public discussion was on the preliminary engineering report for the renovation of the former rescue squad, which I will now refer to in the future unless you have another name, EMS station. I will be referring of this building, not the current leased property. Going through that PER, we allowed a budget for $771,000. Actively working with an A&E firm now, and we'll get a scope of work and a cost proposal and eventually put that out for bids, and the market will tell you your number for that. Outdoor Recreation Center, Parks and Rec made a request. They in Parks and Rec paid for a preliminary engineering report for an outdoor recreation center, and they have made a request of $212,000 to be included for engineering and design for FY24. The board asked for that to be included, so that is in the current capital plan. The schools had some requests, plumbing, HVAC, and vehicles. The vehicles represent 2 school buses for $240,000. So you're all in with school combined is $8,912,535. Next slide, please. I think you did skip past one. Nope, you're on that one, okay. So outside agencies, each year, and it seems to be, I say common practice, you can set up whoever you want to hear from first. Outside agencies, though, are required to submit, like your departments, as far as by the timeline. I think it's January is usually when we ask for these budget submittals, and they have to justify, and they provide if they're a 501c3, they provide all their tax information, so we actually know it's vetted that they are legit, and how long have they been around, and so forth. So on this list is agencies, it's not only agencies receiving funds, I think it's also, is it on there if they didn't receive funding as well, or are these the ones that are only receiving funding? Thank you, thank you. So I won't touch on all the ones that made a request. So basically what you see on the screen, members of the board, general public, is the outside agency request that the board has heard and agreed into those funding levels that are on this slide. That FY24 proposed total is $2,347,324, an increase from last year's budget to this year's budget of 7.6%, or $165,774. The largest, I think we should point out of an increase, the Rappahannock Juvenile Detention Center, which Madison is required, and our region we're served by. That facility is in Stafford. They're trying to do some additional things with staffing there. We've had some sizable true-ups beyond our last 2 or 3 year budget cycles. I think last year's true-up was well over $200,000. So looking at historics, this is probably about in line, so we hopefully don't get into a true-up situation. I'm happy to report, because Ms. Warren is on that finance committee, I'm on the regular committee side of things, that we are tracking under what was actually budgeted unless something changed this year. I don't know if that smile should scare me. Thank you. I didn't know if that smile meant to scare me, but, okay, we're on target, so we're not over yet. So that's the funding that the board has determined. The regional jail, we went down, so there are some trade-offs. Overall, though, you're up from last year is the point I wish to make to everyone. Next slide, please. So this is a large look, 30,000-foot view of where your monies is going in your total budget. So of the general fund is $31,564,626. The TOT funds, as you know, there's a breakdown between what goes back to the TOT and what goes to the county. The TOT fund itself is $135,319. Schools total, and I want to be clear to this, most everyone knows, but I will say their funding is $25,507,560. That is not the county's total funding there, and I don't know if you have that number. I think we can reference it when you have it ready. I will continue though in a moment. So that's total funding. So that's basic school aid represented there from the state, as well as the local funding portion. I'll give you the local funding portion here momentarily. What is it? You want to?
$9,776,883.
So that is the local portion that if this budget is approved, that would be the transfer come July 1. Thank you, Ms. Warren. VPA, are also known as social services, is $3,356,238. CSA, and I believe that's the Children's Services Act, that is $1,950,000. And then our debt service fund, that's a requirement every year, but we spell that out so you know where our debt service annual payment is. For FY24, it's $1,711,864, which brings your total revenue of $64,225,607, and that's your revenue breakdown. Next slide, please. Expenditure breakdowns, and again, this is a balanced budget, so I know you can say, well, Jonathan, these numbers are the same. Well, the expenditures, they have to be the same. We're required to have a balanced budget. We're not the federal government. So a lot of these numbers are the same. Your total expenditures net of transfer to other funds will be $51,220,241. The total of transfer to other funds will be $13,005,366 for a total expenditures of $64,225,607. Next slide. Here's your expenditure breakdown. So you kind of get a feel, by the pie, if you will, the slice where your money's going. So tight fund there, I mean, it's not zero, but it's close to zero. That was $130-some thousand. So I'll take the small and work my way up. CSA represents 3% of the budget. VPA, which is social services, represents 5% of the budget. I am happy to report only 3% of your budget represents debt service, and I think that should give reassurance to the general public that the board is not overburdening the citizen, the taxpayers, with debt service. Schools represent 40% expenditure of the budget, and then the general fund, which is all the other services, come in at 49%. Next slide, please. So your remaining steps, you're having your public hearing today. Budget adoption, and this is, I think you have an opportunity, you can consider it adopted on the 25th if you wish, or you could go to that following meeting, your first meeting in May. I will go back and look at the school's official transmittal date of the budget because state code requires you, there's like a 30-day from transmittal or no later than May 15 that you have to take an action at least on their budget. Well, it makes sense for you to take action on the whole budget. I think you're in a good place if you went the 25th or early May. Really, I've got my eyes on two dates. April the 12th, the General Assembly comes back in session. I want to see what's additional things that they do. When they wrap up, who knows, that varies. And then April 18th, the comp board is meeting, and they have discussion on whether it's COLA pay or if they're going to recommend extra funding to the General Assembly for additional positions. So I have my eyes on those two dates to see if there will be any change or discussion that I would need to bring back for the board. But you could legally adopt based on what was presented today on the 25th because you've had your public hearing by that point in time. And then your appropriation always comes later. You don't have to do that in late April or early May, but we customarily do that the first week of June, and that gives staffing enough time to make sure the budget is loaded. We've transmitted all the documents back. We've let outside agencies know what you're funding. Departments know what their funding is. They get their copy of their department budget that's loaded in Munis, and you go about your merry way on July 1st with the new FY24 funding. Next slide. I don't know if there's any. So that's the public hearing notice, which shows you we advertise. Next slide. Whoop. All right. So that's, Mr. Chairman, that concludes portion of the public hearing budget presentation. Ms. Warren definitely has any of that in-depth information. If you have questions, she stands ready also to answer.
Ms. Warren, do you have any general comments?
I don't. I do think, as far as the breakdown on the proposed budget, I did some percentages. If the public would like to know, the public safety is 28%. That's a big one for the county, and I do want to note that we have a very nice, healthy budget in public safety. But overall, I think Jonathan has covered everything that I had.
Anyone have any questions for staff? I think we should probably hold our comments till after we go through the public, and then we can say whatever, wherever we're at. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
All right. All right, let's open up to the public. Ms. McDowell?
Dick McDowell.
Or-
May I correctly note that the Madison County Public Library is actually the Madison Library Incorporated. It's not a department of the local government or state government.
Thank you, Nick. Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you. Jim Smith from Brightwood. As 50% of the 13,800 of our public that attended each of the meetings, I send the regrets of the other 50% who was under the weather. You are to be commended for how you handled your budget this year. The departments under your purview did as they were instructed. come in with a bare bones budget. Your questions were exceptional. Your results are as good as we could hope for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Other public comment?
You know, in the U.S. Constitution, one of the few things that were actually authorized to Congress to do was under Article 1, Section 8, provide for post offices and post roads. So roads was one of the very, very few enumerated things they were supposed to do. And that gives us an idea of what are the very few things that government is supposed to do. Now, I saw the list, and I don't disagree with Mr. Smith that it looks like y'all have done a good job. But after talking to Mr. San Nicolas, I don't think y'all realized, because he was kind of surprised, to quote him, "I can't think of a program that would allow you to widen a road without paving it." And following up, as myself and Mr. Sansone did, because well, and I'm writing that down, putting quote marks, so he sees that I'm doing that. He said, no, you can't have an unpaved funding allocation. It must be with a paving allocation. And so he's saying that from VDOT's standpoint, and I said, so should we be asking the state legislature then to change what you do so that we can just have a simple widen the road so people don't crash? And I mean, the time that we were gone, that was basically it. I'm saying it for my road, Mr. Sansone was saying it for his road, Lindsay Lane, and Mr. San Nicolas was very politely and very thoroughly telling us there's no money, and there's no vehicle for getting money. He said, I don't know of any, and he seemed like a pretty informed sort of guy. He's going to try to look into it, but there isn't one. So maybe not in this year's $64 million, but we would encourage you to be thinking, okay, if VDOT can't fix, and he was very adamant that he can't fix unpaved roads. He can maintain them, he can plow it, snow plow, he can put down gravel, but he can't fix the very clear problems. So that means it appears to be this government's job to do it. And I would again suggest that one of your primary responsibilities is make sure we can go from point A to point B without dying, crashing, or ruining a paint job on our new trucks. Thank you.
Other public comment? Other public comment? Anybody online? Oh, all right. No comment from Annette, though? Yeah, there you go. All right, public comment. All right, public comment's over. Back to the board. We're going to do it again. Back to the board. Who has comments, thoughts, anything on the budget?
I'm good.
I think we both talked about it.
I'll tell you, no doubt. I do think it's worth mentioning, Ms. Warren, Mr. Weekly, and all of the staff in the county come to us with a very cost-conscious budget, and we try to act in a conservative way, to understand wants versus needs. Thank you all for making it as easy as it can be for us and understandable for everyone in Madison County. Anybody else? All right, moving on. Old business, sign ordinance. Mr. Weekly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, I'll take us where I believe we left off, and then I'll politely hand it over to the expert, Mr. Gregg. This has gone through several discussions at the board level, county administration, county attorney level, consultation with the registrar, who obviously has direct consultation with the electoral board. How this came about is signs on county property, specifically county property will be the discussion. Mr. Gregg has some recommendations there, particularly what you'll see in your second attachment as county attorney's second memo. That may be a way to move forward and then have an ordinance crafted around that. So I believe that's where we left off and where we are currently. Mr. Gregg, is it?
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. I think that's a fair statement. A couple of things that kind of came up, and I think perhaps I was approaching this issue backwards. The question is, what do we have to allow in terms of public property? And we do not have to allow any signs on public property. We just have to make sure that whatever our rules are, we enforce them evenly. So then the question becomes, is there something that we can do to inform the general public about elections so that whenever they appear at the registrar's office, is there at least some information we can have? A thought that we have discussed, that we can discuss in further detail, is simply posting the official sample ballot as soon as it is approved by the Department of Elections. At least that way, there's a placard someplace of a size to be determined by the Board of Supervisors advertising this. Now, the only thing that makes our proposed sign ordinance a little complicated is the fact that there is exactly one polling location that is on publicly owned property, specifically the Kriglersville Elementary School, which has not been a school, as everyone knows, for more than 15 years. But in any event, the idea would be that we develop an ordinance that says that on the day of elections, we can in fact advertise there with the provision that the signs be removed within a time certain, probably 24 hours after the polling places have closed. And there are two reasons for this, and there's really kind of two issues. The public space, what I'm going to call the county administration building, and the registrar's office, if we post something there, it can be minimally intrusive in terms of not having 50 signs from various candidates or for positions, on the publicly owned space. At the same time, with the Kriglersville School, we do allow for some electioneering on the day of election so that people can make a determination. What I would propose we do, and we have I think the first one we have looked at is from Albemarle County. There's a slightly different one that contemplates some of the items that I have set forth. It would be an ordinance change, so we need to advertise it in the newspaper for 2 weeks, and then we would hold a public hearing for the purpose of determining whether to modify our existing ordinance pertaining to those sections of our sign ordinance.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may add, Ms. Eanes is here, the registrar. Mr. Smith, I don't know if you're here on behalf of the electoral board or not, but, okay. So I believe the board's direction, which we sought when this initially came up, is to get kind of some suggestion, recommendation, and I believe it has at least been vetted. So it may be appropriate, one, take an opportunity to ask any questions you have. It's their territory, if you will, as far as elections go. I believe we're not only in concern of necessarily singling out saying that it's political signs, it would be all signs, if you will, on county property. The junk cars, the false advertisement of Hughes Internet. So that would be considering. And then if you get to a point where you feel appropriate action, it may be best just a simple direction for council, county administration, and the electoral board via registrar to work together to bring forth a draft amendment to the ordinance for your consideration, and you can certainly set a public hearing from that date.
Ms. Eanes, anything to add? No, I would just give it to you. There was like 6 of us here.
I don't think that I have too many suggestions to add. Mr. Gregg's information's all correct that's up here, so we don't have to have signs allowed. We did pull our polling place leases, and it doesn't mention anything with signs, which I know is one of the notes that he went over in there. One point that I would like to make is the day that sample ballots are approved from the state, we do print them on the yellow paper. We post them in the office. We've got them available for folks to come in and pick up. We'll mail them to you. We put it on our county website, and we put it on our Facebook page. So they're definitely available in any way, shape, or form that you need it. So we always have that information. It shows every candidate's name, their political affiliation, if they have that. It doesn't give any candidate information, but it's just the sample of the actual ballot.
Also, we talked about putting it potentially on our marquee
We do that, I'm sorry, in the hallway right here. Yeah,
no,
so it's
but
posted there.
Push pins, yeah. Marquee. All right, Ms. Smith, anything to add? All right, questions, comments, what do you all want to do here? Who has thoughts on this? Please.
Chairman, since this is one of the things that I had brought up. Now, I like Mr. Gregg's approach to this. I would ask, I guess directly to both the electoral board and Ms. Eanes, by posting here on this quote-unquote bulletin board out there, would there be any merit or advantage to perhaps having an enlarged sample ballot placard that would go maybe take up half of the board, so that folks could come in, look at it, browse through it, large print
That's
for
what I
people
was-
that have to see, can't see.
No,
damn well.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
But I agree with Mr. Gregg. I think he's come up with a good plan here.
Yeah, I don't know that we have the option to print something that size here, but we can definitely get it done. Not an issue.
11 by 17 would probably,
Okay.
right? Or you know, that's,
Whatever,
yeah.
whatever's cheap and big that we can put on our bulletin board. I mean, and that's informative. I mean, that should be what we should be focused on. And it doesn't prioritize or point out one candidate over another. It's just
Right.
factual information. Anybody else have any comments? I don't think this thing should go to the planning commission or anything. I think Mr. Gregg, working with the electoral board, should go ahead and see if you can start putting something together for us. You've got good initial steps, and then we can go down once we have something that is finalized and formal, we can go down the path of having a public hearing. Does that sound reasonable?
Yep.
That work, Mr. Gregg?
Yes, sir.
Anything else on this? All right, let's go to the next one. Thank you all very much, by the way. Discussion, Article 4, Section 4.3, Area Regulations, 3 acres per use clarification. I'm frankly glad to see this. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, is it okay to go, whoa, this thing's terrible, to go back to item 6?
I apologize. Yes, item 6. I do apologize. Please, Ms. Turner.
You're welcome to skip it if you like.
No, I like calling on you.
Alrighty, so not a lot to update you guys on, but I definitely want to give you an update on the committees and appointments. So, been working on this, and my computer keeps kind of freezing, so if I can't zoom in, great, I do apologize. So the only things I'm going to point on, unless you ask, are the ones that are highlighted in yellow, because those are the big changes. So this is county committees. So for building code boards of appeals, you can see we had 2 that ran out in March. And that is Mr. Al Ish, and sorry, and Mr. Krigler. We reached out to both of them, and they both would like to be reappointed if the board is willing to reappoint them. I do have their applications attached in the packet today, so that is something that we can either vote to approve or not approve. I'm going to go through all of the county committees, and then we'll get to the applications. So I wanted to point out this one right here, and it's on 2 pages, so I do apologize. It looks a little funny. There is no need for the board right now with this, but I wanted to make you aware because you can see that there are some dates that are going to be, some terms that are going to be coming up. This is not something the board or the county picks for these people. This is from social services. Miss Tiffany Woodward, she is in charge of this list. And a lot of these roles are based on people's positions. So these will be given to us once the summer comes around, once June is closer to. I've talked to Miss Woodward recently, and this is the most updated list. And she is going to be in communication with me to make sure that we keep that maintained. So I just want to put that on your radar if you see those dates, not to be alarmed that we're not advertising for that. There has been communication and will be updated. And then for Family Assessment and Planning Team, same thing. Ms. Woodward will give us that list once June rolls around. And we have been in communication, and it's the most updated list that she has. So wanted to put that on your radar since a lot of those dates are coming up. And then the IDA, the Industrial Development Authority, which just had a meeting, has two folks that run out today, and they both would like to reterm if the board is willing. And I have both their applications attached as well. That's Mr. William Hale and Mr. Hoffman. Alrighty, and that is one more note for Social Services Board. This comes from Ms. Ward. She has two people in June that will be running out. Mr. McDowell had the possibility to reterm because he only served 1 year, whereas Ms. Weaver had done her two that she could do, 2 terms. Mr. McDowell stated that he would not be reterming, so we are going to be looking for her to be sending us information for 2 people come June 30th. But that is something that she will give us the names for. We do not do on our side. Alrighty, so here are the applications. Any questions on the applications that are in the packet agenda?
I'd like to point out Al Esch's handwriting is very poor. Other than that, he's a pretty outstanding type of person. Let's make this real easy here. I think we have to do this in 2 pieces, on the basis that Ms. Hoffman probably is going to abstain on 1 piece. Anybody have any issues just appointing these people to the Building Code of Appeals? That's Al Esch, or Alvin Esch, and Danny Krigler to the Building Code of Appeal Board.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Couldn't find better people to do that.
Yeah.
And then the IDA, we have Mr. Hoffman, who is willing to serve again, and then Billy Hale, again, both very qualified.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstained.
Abstain.
Alrighty, thank you. And then I'm going to move to appointments. You all made a note, sorry, I'm trying to zoom, for the Piedmont Workforce Development, and we did advertise in the newspaper for this. So Mr. Jewett is filling in this role, but he did state, thank you guys, I inherited this list.
No, I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it. Look at Steve Hoffman's, let's call it his resume, but I think it's his Madison County list. I think that's pretty impressive. I mean, it really is. I mean, it shows all the different things that he served on for just countless years. How many years, Ms. Hoffman?
200 and some years, I think is what I figured up.
I mean, that's pretty good, and that's worth mentioning.
So he started with the fire company when he was 3?
No, 15.
I mean, that's pretty good, so, I mean, you gotta give Steve a lot of credit for that. Please, Ms. Turner, proceed.
All right.
Excuse me.
No worries. Alrighty, zooming back in to Mr. Jewett. The meeting time was a challenge, so we are seeking somebody, if interested, to fill that role to help him out. But we have not had anyone. We've reached out to Miss Gardner, Tracy Gardner, to see if she had any connections, and she's been trying to find someone as well.
Wait, advertising?
We have.
Ineffectively?
Yeah, it's ineffective, so I think we've advertised it right. The question is, how much money in advertisement do you want to spend?
I just can't, the meetings happen when I'm working.
Yeah, the time of the meeting, so that's why we're trying to work through like Tracy Gardner through Economic Development, just to see if we've got names, or if there are people that didn't make your list on some committees, we will invite them.
It seems like we got a good mechanism. Quit spending money on it, do that.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Alrighty, and then we've kind of been talking about the Rappahannock Rapidan Division of Court Services, and we talked about advertising and different things with that position, but we did find out that Mr. Early is active and he is good to fill for that role, and is willing to fill for that role. The only thing I have highlighted is his term like when it runs out. That is not updated. We are waiting for information. We've been in contact with the new director at VASAP, the VASAP office in Culpeper. He's working on getting me some documents that will make sure that number is accurate. So that is the only update for that. That role is active. I'm just waiting for a new date for that.
All right.
Alrighty, and then if the board is willing, we'd like to start advertising for this role. The Thomas Jefferson Area Criminal Justice Board, Ms. Clarissa Berry, will be running out in June, June 30th, and she has served her max time, so we will need to fill that role with you guys.
Is there anybody in her office that can do this? I mean,
We'll ask.
yeah, like,
That'd be appropriate,
it
really.
would seem to me, I mean, and Neil Goodlow and her are very close, we know, but I mean, somebody else in that office could take this.
He's
if
retired.
they've
All right.
Got some time. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
This would be a
for
great way to
Clarissa.
spend his time.
See if you can talk to them.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes, sir.
I mean, I don't see any reason to be advertising. I mean, if we want to put it on the county website, that's one thing. I'm not trying to cut Gracie out of it, but in the same sense, I mean, we're not getting a whole lot of applicants, so what are we doing here?
Sounds like a plan.
Anybody got any questions for Ms. Turner? You want to come back, Ms. Turner, and give us an update here in a couple of weeks?
Well, I have one more report, no updates in this one, but I just added it to the packet agenda so you could see it. Does anyone have any questions on this?
How's the library board treating you well, Jim?
Wonderful.
That's the way to be.
Thank you.
Oh, you're a good fella.
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess the question would be, other than, we're waiting on the bylaws, if you will, of VASAP. I think we're District 16, whatever district we're in, we're waiting on that. We've got some early confirmation that Mr. Early was reappointed in June. When would you like for us to come back? I know I heard 2 weeks, but the appointments, the vote that you just took today will clear up those appointments. We will seek the person through Clarissa's office. So I guess my question is, if we find Piedmont Workforce and someone for that, bring it back to you as soon as we have applicants?
Anytime, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think we can address this promptly whenever you all get some
Okay.
qualified people.
Okay.
We appreciate the effort. Anybody got any questions, comments, thoughts?
No, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. All right, now we're gonna go to the 3 acres area regulation, Article 4, Section 4.3. Mr. Weekly, you wanna start, you want Ms. Gregg to start?
I'll give a quick background, and certainly Sean is the subject matter expert. So Article 4, Section 4.3, area regulations. I think there might be some additional verbiage that could help on clarifying, particularly to staff, and maybe even some who review, or even at the recommendation level of the planning commission, or at the voting level, you all as the governing body. It's just to kind of clear up that 3 acre per use. And I think this deals with A1 area. Some may look at it and believe it's house only, one dwelling. Is there an allowance for a detached garage? I think clearly a residential garage could, a commercial garage could not. So the goal is, and we've sought out some of you all for feedback. I know Supervisor Yao had provided some. I think Sean had certainly some good direction. So that's a little bit of the background. I hand it over to Sean for his advice.
Mr. Gregg?
The board will recall this issue came up about, I think, 18 months ago or so, and I don't know why, but it suddenly just sort of fell off everyone's radar. I should have been a little more diligent with that. But you'll recall that the issue was a question of interpretation. Now, for years, it had been interpreted to read exactly like the proposed language. Some people may raise some questions about whether the standing interpretation was in fact accurate. This board directed us to look back into that. In fact, I think it was referred to the planning commission, if I'm not mistaken, I just don't recall. But I made some suggestions back then, and nothing happened at that point. So I think the idea is, as I'm kind of wrapping up projects, find out what the board wants to do. And the board has several options. It can leave things the way they are, or they can make these changes, or they can make additional changes. It's the board's prerogative. Traditionally, it has been interpreted that, there has to be 3 acres per use, for the zoning in that section. And, now that language is much more formally codified than it was previously. So if you would like, we can schedule this for a public hearing, joint public hearing with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, and the board can take action. If the board has any additional.
I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, that's okay. If the board has any additional suggestions to tweak the language, call me. I'm happy to work on it and figure out where we are.
All right. All right, I'm just gonna say what I think, and then I'm gonna go to everybody. One, I don't think this needs to go to the planning commission. I think the intent from Madison County, is that each use requires 3 acres. There's no real mystery here.
In ag zone.
In ag zone, in A1, thank you. Residential garage, even detached, common sense plays into that. You can have a detached garage. That's not additional use. It's part of the residence. I think the original is fine. If we need to clarify it so it can't be interpreted in another way, then that's fine too. It looks like we've got a solution to it. I don't think it needs to go to the planning commission. I do think we can schedule a public hearing and do it ourselves. Mr. Yao?
Yeah, I mean, I spent 9 years on the planning commission, and it was interpreted that way all that time. And as a matter of fact, I mean, I called Betty Grayson last week, and I said, this is still an issue, open for interpretation. And I said, don't you think our intent has all along, not only has it been implemented like that, but that was the intent of the thing all along. So, I mean, Sean, is this, you put there shall be a minimum acreage requirement of 3 acres per use for all zoning in this section. That was your
I believe that was
your
my
words
original proposal.
to clear
and
it up.
Again, if there are any questions or modifications, before we go to public hearing, we will just make sure that we have changed the ordinance that is currently on the board.
Yeah.
And we will advertise it with what I'm going to call the new language.
I mean, that's what I've practiced for 12 years now, and that's my interpretation of it. And I think clearing it up would probably be the way to go.
You don't want to see how it goes in year 13?
Nah.
No, let's stick with this. All right. Other comments? Anybody else? I mean, anybody? Is this something that potentially, since we already have a public hearing, we've already authorized a public hearing on May 9th? Is that too soon for this, or?
I think that's a little too soon.
All right.
Probably sometime in June would be preferable.
Everybody fine with that?
So you want to just,
And Mr. Chairman, just to confirm, I want to make sure that we are not required to go back before the Planning Commission.
Yes, sir.
And one reason I say that, some of you may have seen in the newspaper that Fairfax County zoning ordinance has been declared void by the Supreme Court of Virginia because they passed it during the COVID rules, and there was some question as to whether they met the quorum requirements and everything. I just want to make sure if we're going to make this change that we have it right and that we do not have to go through the Planning Commission.
What about in the next meeting or the meeting after, y'all come back, give us a quick update, and then we can go down the path of scheduling a public hearing.
Sure.
Is that fair for everybody? Sounds good. All right. Any other comments on this one? Yeah, cranking this thing on. Mr. Weekly, let's go down the path of information and correspondence. Woodbury Forest DEP permit renewal.
yes, it's standard by the state to provide public notice and a public comment period for any permit holder when they're renewing, whether it's RSA. I think Madwood has one for their treatment pond there. Certainly Woodbury Forest has one for their treatment facilities. So DEQ gave us notice that the permit is up for renewal for Woodbury Forest, and they're accepting public comment now for that permit. And all the public comment is to DEQ. I think in your packet, the public comment period runs from April 13th to May 13th of 2023. So comment goes directly to DEQ. There's an email from Mr. Benjamin Holland at deq.virginia.gov, should there be any concerns from the general public. So that notification has been captured in your board packet, which has been published for the public's use to make any comment they necessary to the appropriate body.
Questions? All right. UMass renovation.
EMS renovation update, I wish I had a little more to report. A lot of it's just timing of staff. I did reach out to one of our professional service agreement providers for an A&E firm to start talking about developing a scope of work and ultimately a proposal that you all can consider and then potentially move forward for design and bid and build. Where we're at currently after that conversation is I wanted our building official to be on a call with me in this A&E, in the A&E firm, excuse me. It's important to talk about code, which code you're using. Well, this isn't a change of use. So I want to get all these questions or assumptions out of the way up front to make sure we are marching along the same music. Mr. Wilkes is the expert. I have full faith and confidence in him. He had successful hip surgery. He has a doctor appointment checkup on April 18th, and hopefully good news there. He'll be back after that, and we can schedule this call. So I'm not putting the delay on him. I just think he is a integral part of this team as we move successfully through a renovation project. So I hope in say, either the second meeting in April or early part of May, we'll have some further information. I know the goal is let's get moving. Do it properly, but let's get moving. Moving along, sir, information correspondence. Item 10, reassessment request for proposal. My hats off to Ms. Warren, Ms. Thacker, Mr. Daniel. Went through the review process. Looked at some other localities, reassessments they did, looked at our last reassessments, and then found the right fit, if you will, for our RFP. As you know, RFPs don't require your review in advance. However, we make you aware of it. You certainly will be involved in the decision-making process. We feel like we're in good position with this to receive it, at least 3 or more. I think in years past, that's what we generally average is about 3 proposals. Key deadline, as you can see up there on the screen, the issue date was April the 7th. It is on the county's website, properly linked, posted on the EVA, which is the state procurement website, properly done by Ms. Warren. EVA is a great website because those who want to participate in solicitations and know when a bid is coming out, they can register through that site and automatically they're aware of it. So that's why we use that. It was very successful with our engineering response. Questions are due. So there's always a question period by April 21st, response to questions by April 28th, and submission due date will be May 8th by 4:30 p.m. The anticipated award date is June 13th, and I believe that aligns with a board meeting by this body. So there will be a selection committee, I believe, as part of our process that would be formed. I believe Mr. Daniel, and we have some time, we'll reach out to the board. You can give direction tonight if you wish. The group and Mr. Daniel specifically felt like he would at least like to have a board member. Obviously, if you like to commit one of you all or 2, you can't have more than 2, but be part of that selection committee. So you're reviewing those proposals. I know they can be dry, but you have to review those proposals, score them, and you meet together as a group, and then ultimately, that recommendation from the panel will go to the full board of supervisors for consideration of approval on June 13th. I said he asked. He can't demand you, but.
Excited. Dustin and Ms. Hoffman.
All right.
You good with that? Yeah. Yeah.
We'll let you do that.
Unless Jim really wants to.
Jim,
You're okay, Jim?
they're wonderful people.
We agree. All right, there's our appointment.
So there is scoring criteria that will be involved. And certainly the team that's going through this, Ms. Hoffman, Mr. Dawson, we can kind of get you up to speed on this criteria and the weight of the scoring. But basically be evaluated 25% for professional qualifications of the firm. If you are in the packet, it's page 160 of the packet. Thank you. So 25% for professional qualification of the firm and their staff resume. So you want to know who's assigned to the project. We don't want to know who's sitting somewhere in a cubicle that won't be part of this. We want to know who's your team and their qualifications. 25% for prior experience and reputation of contractor. So that gets into the references, actual references. We don't want references from 30 years ago. Familiarity, I got that word first time. We struggled during our review with Madison County to 25% with that. And just because someone's not a firm here doesn't mean they wouldn't have familiarity. Certainly most of these companies who will bid this time has probably bid the last 2 cycles. And then 25% is the price. We want to make sure they're being fair and objective with their proposal. So again, there's time for the group to meet with board members, and they can meet in advance. I think it'd be prudent to go ahead and form that committee now that we know our board members. And then the group can start talking about schedules of time in advance, because I know it's summertime coming up, to set up. There will be questions, so again, we can develop those, or if you want to throw in questions as well. But thank you for participating. All right, Shenandoah National Park Old Rag Pilot Program. We were given notice by the park, and I believe that press release went out to news media and others. As you recall, a little over a year ago, they put the 800 per day ticket program, the pilot program, into place. The idea was to have a positive impact on those visiting and hiking Old Rag. Being up there before myself, and that's off my bucket list, some of those areas can get very congested when you're trying to move through, you're waiting for some time. So being that any government report has dollars and time associated with it, we'd like to know what do they find out, if there's recommendations. Ultimately, I think it's a good idea for Madison, whether you want to speak as this voice or get the voice of your Blue Ridge Committee members, to give feedback, because the counties that make up the park make up the Blue Ridge Committee meeting, and I think there's been precedent in the past, as they are your conduit, that you either receive information or give information to the park. But you are the governing body. You can choose to inform, comment, or not comment. But there will be, there's a link there in your packet to the information of the report.
I was shocked that I didn't hear complaints about this. Like, I heard 0 complaints about this. Shocked in every way. I do think this is one, though, that we should probably go to the Blue Ridge, our representatives from the Blue Ridge Committee, Mr. Ballard, and, oh, good gosh.
And me.
And you, and Bruce.
Bruce
Bowman.
Thank you. Other than, yeah, we have pretty good representation on that board. Let's see what they say, and then we can put out a statement.
So would the strategy be, and Mr. Yao, on the board you'll see a link. That's where the written report can be found. So in my understanding, Mr. Chairman, the Blue Ridge Committee members will read that report, provide any feedback to the board so you can issue a statement at the appropriate time.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, got it.
I was trying to negatively imply your participation in it.
Yeah.
But the other two
Yeah,
are really, really good.
I'll probably.
It's a weighted average, is that what you're
Lead on
doing?
that.
Okay.
It is,
All right.
it is. No, that's a good, they do just an outstanding job. I mean, you can't, I mean, Good Lord. Everybody
Okay.
work on that, come back to us, promptly, and we'll have a comment.
Yes, sir. There's some upcoming public hearings scheduled for April 25th, and next year I will try to emphasize that this is me, not the rest of the team, get these additional considerations in during the same time of your budget hearing, so you're not having different budget hearings. I mean, we still have to pay for advertisement, but you have administrative fees. There was a slight change in the structure of review charges. Mr. Wilkes wanted some consistency, the way they review per square foot, like for plumbing and electrical, it's all the same. So that was relatively the change. And even though you are not increasing taxes, there is a tax rate ordinance that lists the tax rates. So the general public will be able to review and provide input if they so wish during a public hearing. So both of those are scheduled for the 25th, and I recommend doing those separately, same night, and they've been advertised. And those will run twice. There has to be 7 days of separation, and then the last advertisement 14 days before the public hearing. So we've got all that covered. Then lastly, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, this was an addition today when you amended the agenda. We got recent word about the Opioid Abatement Authority grant potential program that Madison County can participate in. As you may recall, you appointed me as one of Madison's representative, Chairman Jackson is the other, to be part of the Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission. That is Patrick Monty's group. You probably remember Patrick. And there are two funding sources for opioid settlement. One is the direct payment, which Madison County is currently receiving. I think we're at $30-some thousand. 20 of that, which is in your budget, $20,000 is committed for the drug court program for this year. But the other funding source is via grant. The state created the Opioid Abatement Authority, and they held on to a lot of the settlement monies. The counties could be entitled to them, but you have to develop a program. And we've met with various departments to see what needs may be. Ultimately, I made a decision that I think it's best served from a regional approach to have a program defined and administered. And all 5 counties of the regional commission were in agreement. I'm not saying I single-handedly came up with that idea, but we were in agreement, and we requested the Community Services Board, that's Executive Director Jim LaGraff and his team, to consider it. Ultimately, he did, and they came back relatively, very thoroughly, very quickly with a program. There was an update because the CSB cannot be the fiscal agent, so all these grants, someone has to be the fiscal agent. And this particular one, the agency being the CSB could not. It had to be one of the localities. We didn't step up and say, us, we have enough with ERP and other things going on. I want to encourage our staff to come to work, not dread it. But Culpeper County was kind enough to step forward for the fiscal agent. So just as late as today, I emailed the Board of Supervisors material. I'd like for you all, please review that. And I'd like to bring it back at the April 25th meeting for a potential vote. Basically the vote, and I've also included Hannon and Sean, so legal review can go through it, but it's a cooperative agreement, which you see all the counties listed, and Madison is listed as part of cooperative agreement. You all have to vote on that. That's not something I can nor would I administratively do without your vote. It's $220 or $200-some thousand they're asking for, but that's the grant. In that documentation, I didn't see any local match, but I will clarify that before the 25th with Mr. LaGraff to make sure there's no local money, because sometimes through grants, you have to put a portion up front and then receive it. We'll have that nailed down before we come back on the 25th. But at least you have that in advance. You've got 2 weeks to review. If you've got questions, please plug them my way, Jennifer's way. We'll get with Mr. LaGraff and get any answers to your questions.
Anybody got any questions on this? Review it. Jonathan will have some more answers for us. Carter, you got anything?
No.
All right, come back to us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Public comment. Public comment. All right, public comment's closed. We do have a closed session this evening. Thank you all for coming.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that the board convene in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3711A1 for personnel, 2.2-3711A7 for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, and 2.2-3711A8 for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. There probably will be action, won't there?
This conference is no longer being recorded.